I'd like to invite Gillian Sandler to the stage. Her resume is too extensive to list. She's a serial entrepreneur in the neuroscience space, a renowned investor, and an expert in brain sciences. Gillian, please.
Thank you for the chance to be here. I'm going to ask Hagai, Bergman, and Howard Morgan to come up now, and then I'll share a little bit about them and dive into some questions. So Hagai is luckily here with us from Hebrew University. He had his education at the Technion and has been with Hebrew University since 1990. He's also the president of the Israel Society for Neuroscience, and he has an extraordinary career in neurosurgery and neuroscience. And he also did the first published work on deep brain stimulation in monkeys, published in 1990 at Johns Hopkins. And he has been a leader and an innovator in DBS applied to Parkinson's. And thank you, Jack Hidry, for the beautiful segue. But we're going to learn a lot more about his work and where he sees the future and what he's most excited about. And Howard Morgan, for those who you don't know him, he got a bachelor in physics and a doctorate in operations research, and he moved in 1982 from academia to investing and was a pioneer in investing in next generation companies, leveraging innovation across industries. Founder of Renaissance Labs, Idea Lab, and First Round Capital. So we're going to start. I think we're going to start with you, Howard. Mm-hmm. And you've been an early stage investor over decades. Mm-hmm. Not only an early stage investor, but also early for industries. Mm-hmm. So you've been able to see innovation and technology transform industries. Can you speak a little bit personally about what your passion in the application of innovation tied to neuroscience and what you're most passionate about today, and also how that compares to the kind of application of innovation in other industries in your past?
I like to say that I made a lot of money investing at two stages, too early and way too early. And that's certainly been true of things we did back in the 70s and then the 80s in speech recognition and speech synthesis and things of that sort. About 10 years ago, I invested in a company called Neurovigil, which was doing sleep monitoring and based out of the Salk Institute in California, and had really interesting technology for being able to do non-invasive brainwave monitoring with just one little chip on your head instead of the 17 wires they put on you at a sleep clinic. And using a lot of higher order mathematics and the computing power available then, was able to get a good sense of how your brainwaves were affected, and particularly how they were affected by drugs. So central nervous system drugs that people were testing for various clinical conditions could be tested because they always impact people's sleep patterns. And that's something that you have to be very careful of when you're doing those drugs. So I realized back then that what we were starting to be able to learn about the neuroscience, about the brain science, was going to lead to a lot of interesting technology and a lot of interesting companies. I'm mostly an investor in the software side of the technologies, not in the wet biology medical device side of the technology. But I've seen that explode. And the other piece that's exploded, of course, is genomics and the personalized medicine. And those are coming together in some sense, because what we learn about some of the mental disorders, things that affect the brain, are really genetically motivated in some ways. And so at Cold Spring Harbor, where I'm on the board of trustees, they've done a lot of work, people like Mike Wigler, in what causes, from a genetic point of view, things like schizophrenia and autism and Asperger's. And there are a lot of theories. Nobody's proven anything yet, but it looks very suspiciously like, certain proteins, certain genes that are expressed or copied too many times, copy number issues. Lots of things can affect that. And that's the modeling. And Jack was kind of talking about how do we get from modeling and doing things in the computer to then affect the real world. And those are the kind of things that interest me. So very recently, my passion turned to a company in California called Dopamine. It's two USC neuroscientists who are using computers to evoke the dopamine response, which basically gets you to do more of whatever you were just doing. And they're doing it for things like pill compliance, getting older adults who should be taking their pills to take them. They're also doing it for things like getting you to buy more things in-app purchases in a game by knowing exactly when to stroke your ego. So we're seeing the science of neuroscience being now applied and trigger those neurotransmitters by using software. Very, very different. Another company that I recently invested in that goes along this way is an Israeli company called MindYou, MYNDYOU, which is using computers and AI and speech and so on to try to detect mild cognitive impairment long before it's, generally speaking, detected by some of the existing tests. And as part of their studies back in the old, they went back over the old Reagan tapes, and they found that, you could have detected Ronald Reagan's mental deterioration by listening to the speech patterns and watching his walking patterns and gait patterns about 2 years before people started to say, is something wrong with Reagan? And the key of this is that if you can detect things early, then you can intervene and maybe postpone by weeks or months the onset of when those people have to live in assisted living, and take them out of living alone. If they can live independently for another month or 2 months or 3 months, that's billions of dollars for the healthcare system. And they're now working on trying to understand the neuro patterns that are indicative of cognitive impairment much earlier than other people are. So we're seeing a lot of ways to apply neuroscience and create interesting technologies and companies out of that.
I would just add to that slightly in terms of, I think people in other fields are really focused on cures and treatments with expansive information on diagnosis. And in the brain and neuro side, we've been stuck in a hole for decades on the diagnosis side, and we've failed at a lot of treatments that are late stage. So what you're describing in the area of diagnosis is one of the most important kind of success stories and evolutions that can help on the treatment side of development as well, because you have to hit it.
Yeah. That's what we're hoping is if you find it very early, you can make different interventions than when it's detected 2, 3, 4 years later, and that can help the society as a whole in doing those things. For example, they now have psychologists interviewing the person every week, and because the interview is computer mediated, they're listening to the speech patterns. If they have a cell phone, they're looking at the gait patterns and how they walk, how they drive, and they can tell from week to week what the deltas are in some of those things and see whether the decline is accelerating, is it leveling off, and so on.
And when you look at you made your first investment in this space almost 10 years.
Yep.
Was it 10 years ago?
About 10 years ago.
And you look now, 10 years later, how different is it to be an investor today in this space than it was 10 years ago? And how do you rate it in terms of, your hope for what can be commercialized and scaled in the next 10 versus where you were looking forward 10 years ago? Well,
that's sort of, we've moved from way too early to too early to probably just early now, which means that over the next 3 to 5 years, I think there's going to be real commercialization of these. For example, there's a set of brain training games that is in FDA trials by Adam Gazzali out at Stanford, and these are the kind of games that Lumosity talks about, but this is much more clinically driven, and actually is showing true improvement in controlling things like ADHD and other things like that with training on a computer. And if that comes through the clinical trials this year, which it's in the equivalent of phase 3 trials, that really opens up now a business opportunity that's huge for people to use computers to train their brains and repattern their brains in different ways, at least a little bit, because we can only do so much in terms of neuroplasticity, in terms of what you can actually redo, as I understand it. I'm not a neuroscientist, as you say. I'm a physicist and a computer science and operations researcher, but I try to keep learning.
I would say that one of the most exciting developments I've seen is the diversity of approaches to solving the problem, which was, has gone from very limited to very diverse. And so that, I think, is one of the most exciting things as looking out in the pipeline.
I think that's very exciting, and the fact that we now have new tools with, much cheaper computing, much bigger databases, the classifiers, all the tools of various levels of artificial intelligence that Jack and the previous panel talked about, that can be applied as we get more information about the neuroscience details, the physical side of it, to really make those work together.
Okay, I'm going to shift. I could ask you endless questions, and I will return, but I'm going to shift to Hagai, and I'd love to start to talk about more specifically your experience in deep brain stimulation and Parkinson's, and have a chance to kind of do a window back into history. You published the first research for monkeys in deep brain stimulation, and just first of all explain a little bit more deeply than Jack did how it works applied to Parkinson's, and also was your original passion in where did it come from? Did it start with Parkinson's, start with neuroscience more broadly, start with, exciting new tools and lobotomies? I mean...
So thank you, Gillian. To make a long story short, I've been raised in an Orthodox family in South Tel Aviv. And quite early, I decided that I'm shifting my interest from question about God and religion to question about ourselves, about brain and how we are self-aware, what is the meaning of our consciousness. So my main interest from the beginning, and still, are this big question of the brain and the mind. Still, I'm very, very aware, and I was very aware, that it will take a lot of time till we'll be able to make a major shift in our understanding of this big question of the brain and mind. And I would like to be practical, okay, and to touch people on the level of day to day. So when I came to my postdoctorate fellowship at Baltimore at Hopkins, we started to study the basal ganglia in the normal and the Parkinsonian monkey. Okay, this was the first generation of a monkey model of Parkinson's disease, and we have found that there is one structure in the brain, the structure that has been mentioned before, the subthalamic nucleus, very small structure somewhere hidden in the brain, that completely change when we induce Parkinson's disease to the monkeys. And the question that we've been asked ourselves at that time was a kind of who is the egg and who is the hen? Okay, is this overactivity in subthalamic nucleus cause Parkinson, or Parkinson cause this overactivity? So we've tried to reduce this activity, and we cure the monkeys. So this was the beginning. 3 years later, it was taken to the human theater by my good friend, Professor Benabit from Grenoble. And the rest is history, because what we do today is that for human patients with severe Parkinson's disease that are unable to benefit anymore of dopamine replacement therapy, so dopamine is a very important drug, we offer them this kind of invasive surgical treatment. When they are coming to operating room, we are making small hole in their skull, put electrode to the subthalamic nucleus, then take this electrode under the skin to a pacemaker, which is located over here. And we really offer at least another 5 to 10 years, good years to this patient. And this operation has been done all over the world in more than 150,000 patients. in Israel is part of the national health basket, so everybody in Israel can get it free of charge. And I'm very, very lucky person because one day a week I'm doing the operation that I've been part of creation of it. And in Hadassah in Jerusalem, we've done more than 500 patients with this kind of surgery.
And were there, when you think about the evolution and where the scale has gone in terms of the number of people served, can you share any kind of challenges to the path of going from monkeys to the first in human to actually what was really getting over the hurdle? What were the hardest things to get over in order for this to evolve into a broad-based therapeutic option? And then maybe speak to, has it changed, what, is there anything today that exists that didn't exist? This is talking back in 1990, this publication. When you look forward at the tools available now in terms of imaging and ligands and technology and computing and AI, where are we today with this, and does it provide opportunities for how expansive the solution could be in the future?
So I think this is exactly the issue. This therapy is with us for more than 20 years, and actually what we are now looking for a way to improve it. So one major issue is actually in navigating correctly to the correct point, okay? In a recent survey of big database that has been done in the United States of more than 30,000 operations, it was found that about 10% of them, 3,000 patients, the electrode were mislocated. So we have developed, actually, this is now in the final stage of approval by the FDA, an automatic navigation for like Google autonomous car, okay? But automatic navigation into the subthalamic nucleus, okay? That actually the only job of the surgeon will to make the barrel and to put the electrode inside, and then the system is going just automatically and say, this is the proper place, okay? So this is one issue that we've done together with a small company located in Nazareth, Israel, Alpha Omega, an Israeli-Palestinian company, and we are very proud of it. The second issue that I do believe that will really change the world is the ability to have automatic adjustment of the parameter of the deep brain stimulation. So today we are doing the surgery, putting the pacemaker, and the patient is coming to the outpatient clinic every 3 months in Israel. In the United States, probably every 6 months, okay, because neurologists' time are much more expensive in the United States. and then the neurologist is adjusting the parameter of the stimulation. But this is really stupid. Parkinson's disease is fluctuating all the time. Sleep is a major issue, for example. And what we came to the idea is that, yes, we would like to copy feedback automatic system for our thermostat, but even more using artificial intelligence method in order to automatically adjust the parameter of stimulation. So back 6 years ago, we've done the first experiment in monkeys where we've shown that this closed loop automatic adaptive system are better than the systems that we offer today to the patient. And this is very important because this tells us that this system of the Parkinson brain can be observed and can be controlled. So now the sky is the limit. And actually all the big companies, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, are making the first step, and we really hope that in 2 years from now, we'll be able to make the next big step in our deep brain stimulation and to offer our patient systems that will automatically adapt to their need in a kind of a very, very sophisticated way that will give optimal control of their symptoms.
So you say that 6 years ago, this was a realization of a challenge and then a vision of what you could do to fix it. If you could create a variable way to understand and dose automatically. So what from that moment of saying, we understand a significant problem, and we have a vision of what we would want to see as a solution. How do you get from there to monkeys, and then the idea that there are companies out there that you say that are racing to develop, and where do you fit into all of, what has been your role in going from that moment through to companies racing for that? What does it mean? Do they have development programs? Did they license IP? What?
So please don't tell the officer of my university, okay? Because I'm not interested in my intellectual properties, okay? So I'm not trying to protect my intellectual properties. I think it is much more important to share the information with the world, and the way that we have done it, okay? And really, our people in Zoom and so on are very angry with me, but I don't care.
We love you.
No, they don't laugh, okay? But the issue is that we went out, okay? We published it, and indeed the big companies are now, the R&D of the big companies are taking the lead, of course, with us speaking with them, with my translation office telling me that they're abusing me, okay? But I don't like to, I don't mind to be abused. And it takes time, because there is a big difference from having a concept, for having the proof of the concept in a monkey, and then to put a device in human patient, okay? Because this device in human patient, we have to be very, very careful. We have to think about all kind of risk and so on and so on. So it takes time, but it will be out, okay? So there are several ways to do it. One way is to make your own company. I decided to go into another direction, okay? And I'm trying to pursue the big companies in order to do it and change the world.
That's, I need to pause. So when you look at what you were envisioning in both places, the other side of what you talked about was the diagnostic side of being able to autonomously surgically implant and hit the right spot near 100% of the time instead of 90% of the time. Where is that in the phase of development and being a human reality from a surgical perspective?
This is reality already.
Okay, so that's the new standard.
This is, well, it is not the new standard yet. It is reality. We've completed the studies. We've done it in 3 centers, actually in Jerusalem and 2 hospitals in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. It is now waiting for the approval of the FDA, but this is reality. Okay, we hope that this will be spread out. Okay, so this is reality already.
And what do you think is, you did all of this in a time where the tools everyone's been talking about today were in their infancy in terms of impact, and we're talking about an explosion of what's possible. Do you think that in your space helps to shorten the time frame to get these ideas into market and to be impacting people, or are there other hurdles that still exist?
Again, taking things to the market, it became more and more difficult this day, okay? It was very, very easy 30 years ago. Today, we are much more constrained. Companies are much more afraid of insurance, of having side effects, so it's taking much more time today to take things to the market. But on the other side, I think that what we are having today is this really very good methodology of artificial intelligence, of machine learning tool that we are using all the time in our everyday doing. So yes, everybody in my group, including me, speaking MATLAB much better than English. Toda for Danny Kamen for saying that having English as a second language is advantage. This was first time in my life that I've heard it. Okay,
well, that's a good segue into. I was going to kind of wrap it up before and see how much time we have. Leave 5 minutes for questions, but that was a perfect segue into. You have a broader involvement in what's happening in Israel and neuroscience overall. You chair an association, and you have mentioned several times about collaborations that have helped you to achieve what's been your imagination into fruition. So maybe talk a little bit about that Israel, besides English as a second or third or fourth language, a little bit about the environment that allows you to move quickly or realize more specifically, and if you want to discuss a little bit more specifically about alpha omega and how that happened and what kind of opportunity that brings, that would be great too.
Yes, but still I would like to use this last 5 minutes even to touch one more important issue for me, and this is our delusion to use the same closed-loop dimmer stimulation for much more severe disorder like schizophrenia, okay? So I think, yes, we are very lucky in Israel. We can dare, okay? We can push forward and we can use our environment to go forward. And actually, we as society, this is the Western society, 1% of our society has the most severe mental disorder, schizophrenia. And here in the United States, 70% of the homeless are schizophrenic. So we as society have never provided a good treatment for schizophrenia. We have good treatment for the positive effect of schizophrenia, for delusion and hallucination, but not for the negative effect. And I think that this is the issue that I'm trying to abuse my position in Israel, that I can dream, that I can actually go outside and say, yes, maybe we can use the same tool that we have, the closed-loop deep brain stimulation, not only to treat Parkinson, but also to treat schizophrenia. If we'll do it, we'll be the light for the world, okay? And yes, we should use it. We should use it not only as a kind of changing the Western world, but also to go to the East, to go to our neighbors. I'm using this, my ability to use science, so I'm working with Alpha Omega, which is a company, the biggest high-tech company in the Palestinian sector of Israel, okay? And we can use our science, first of all, to make the world a little bit better, but not only from the political way, also if we care about this kind of abandoned disease, mental disorder, I think that here, not to make money, okay, but to make the world better, we should go to this kind of treatment.